Today we're excited to have a special guest with us. We're talking with Pastor Matt Burrell. He's the lead pastor at Liberty Church in York, South Carolina, where he's been pastoring this growing and vibrant church for 14 years. He's been married to his wife, Lynn, for 29 years, and together they have 4 awesome children and 4 grandkids. He's also the founder of Grow Together Ministries, where he partners with other pastors, helping them reach their full potential in ministry through providing content, training, and coaching. We're excited to have him join us today as we open the book of Hebrews and talk about what it takes to run an above-average race and to finish it strong. Hey guys, welcome again to another episode of Not Your Average Man. I am Chris. I'm here with Brad, and we have a special guest today, Pastor Matt Burrell. He's the senior pastor at Liberty Church in York, South Carolina. It's also a kind of special event for me because I sit under Matt's teaching. He is my pastor. It's a church that my wife and I just recently had moved our membership over to. So, Matt, thank you very much for being a part of today's show.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm excited about being a part of it today.
Yeah, as we are. And I was sharing with Brad that you weren't always a pastor.
Yeah, I was about 13 years. I policed, and then I've just celebrated 14 years of pastoring. So 2 of those years I was bivocational. So 12 years, I guess, full-time preaching and 13 years full-time policing. So that was my career. Sure was, yeah. I tell people that it's a crazy life I have. I was a police officer, now I'm a preacher. I went from locking people up to setting people free. So that's the way my pastoring career is kind of set out.
I love hearing that.
I love that. That's I also, funny. Real quick, just to nail this, like your perspective on everything's going to be so much like I can relate to it clearly, but I love it. Like you have an awesome perspective on everything now with dealing like everything you had to deal with as a cop. And then now like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I was telling Chris, we were talking at lunch one day, and I said that I've really probably learned more about pastoring and being a preacher from my policing years than I ever did in seminary or Bible school, because that real life where people really live in, what people really going through, what people really facing, it helps you when you get up and say, hey, I got something to say to you, because you know how the world really, how it really is, not how people perceive it to be, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You've been in touch.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, nobody can accuse you of being out of touch. So one of the things that we're wanting you to share, which basically you could share anything that you want to share, because that's right. One of the main themes that we have is calling men up, not necessarily calling them out. Sometimes we need to call them out, but also calling them up to be better than an average man, right? So not your average man. And you had started a new series to kick off 2023, which can be seen on Liberty Church's YouTube channel. So we'll put links in the description so that way you can find that. But you used Hebrews 12, 1-3 as that model, or as the basis of starting that off, which I'm gonna go ahead and read it just for the sake of the listeners. We'll read it to you. It's therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. Okay, so hearing this, so it's one of my favorite verses. It's one of the things about this idea that we have this cloud of witnesses, right? That we're pushing forward. We're in a race, that it is a competition, not a competition. Well, it is. It's within ourselves to do that. So here's what I'm getting to. Because a lot of people, I think, might see their faith, and especially guys, their faith is kind of private, and it doesn't really affect anybody. But that's not the case, is it?
No, it's not the case. And I think it's amazing. He says, look, guys, you're in a race. And, Paul's writing this in a Roman time where people are used to going to the games, and they're going down and buying their tickets, and they're going to watch people race chariots. They're in foot races. They're wrestling. They're of course, in that time, some really extreme sports. But he says, hey, listen, guys, your Christian life is a race. It's something that you're actively involved in, and it's something that you should be participating in. And he makes a statement, and he says, listen, there's a ton of people watching you in this race, just like the games when they would go and watch people race. The stands were full of spectators and people were watching them, rooting for them, pulling for them. And I don't think that a lot of men maybe realize that as we live our lives, we're surrounded by spectators. We've got people who are watching us run our race for the Lord. Of course, the Bible's speaking about the heavenly host that's watching. We know in Hebrews 11, the chapter preceding, he's talking about all those who've already went on to be with the Lord. But if you're living your life and running your race here on the earth, there are other people watching. There's your wife, there's your children, there's your parents, there's your friends, your workmates. They're all peering into your life, and they're wanting to know, is he really in this race for real, or is he just messing around and playing around? Is this just like something, a hobby of his, or is this something that he's really passionate about and he's really trying to win? Is this what he's doing? And I feel like that should be a challenge to us, that there are people cheering for us and there are people watching us, and they're kind of waiting to see, are we going to finish? Is this real, or are we fake in our lives?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Because I know, like, and if you listen to a prior episode, I talk about a 5K that I ran, or that I'm generous when I say I ran. But anyway, having yeah, and then I finished.
Yeah.
But actually, to that point, knowing that I had family at the finish line, that I had people there, I even shared this. I paced myself so I could finish well. So that way I could put in that extra burst that I had, that to be there, to go across the finish line, and knowing that I had people cheering on, and knowing that I was pacing myself behind the woman who came in third for the 70s and older category. But it makes a difference.
It does make it. I think when you are on a treadmill in your bedroom running, or if you're in front of 500 people cheering as you run by, the motivation, the push, that little bit extra, you can go further, you can do more, because you're motivated by those who are watching you. And like you said, I don't want my wife and kids and friends and family stand at the finish line waiting on me to show up, and I never show up because I fell out in a ditch somewhere along the way. That I want them to see me come across that line, and no matter what place I finished in, they're proud of that I finished and that I persevered. And then when they go to run their race, they're looking at me as an example, going, well, I'm a granddad now, so Pop, he lived for the Lord. I can live for the Lord. My sons can look at me and go, well, Dad tried to be a good husband. He tried to be a good dad. He was a good grandfather. I can do that as well. I'm going to do kind of a legacy. I want to be what he is. And I think there's a huge responsibility, because we've got a ton of people watching us, looking at us. And whether we realize it or not, there's a lot of people who look up to us no matter who you are, and they want to be what you are. And so the way we live our Christian life matters, because people are watching us. It really matters a lot.
Oh, I love that. I think the whole time, like when you're talking about this, thinking about your family watching you, your kids watching you, also the other people watching you, like it's a good pressure that you should feel, right? Like we always take pressure into a negative sense, but this sense, it's a good pressure to feel where, hey, I need to make sure, like just spiritually, I need to make sure I'm in my Bible. I need to make sure I'm doing these things. Like I have to live this life because I want other people to see it and see that I'm real, because the one thing, and even in sports, right?
Yeah.
People in the stands, they're also looking for that person to trip, to fall, to lose. Like there's people that are like just out looking at that. And to me, I mean, I don't dwell on that, clearly, but I think that's another good thing where it's like, hey, if you're not living this Christian life real, that's going to happen. I mean, you're going to trip and fall eventually. Like we're not Jesus, we're not perfect, but you're going to succumb to all that pressure where now, I mean, well, Chris, you are close. You're close to perfection easily. So I saw your little shrug. Yeah. I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. Keep it coming. No, but it's such a good pressure to have where it's not, I mean, it motivates me, but I think sometimes I mean, yeah, as I'm talking through this, I just think that pressure is like really, really good for you in your Christian walk, where we're accountable to Jesus, but also I'm accountable to my family, my kids, and anyone else. If I'm saying I'm a Christian, there's other people watching, I'm accountable to them, right?
I agree 100%. That's how I feel about life in general. That pressure that you were just talking about can be from a negative point of view, or it can be from a positive point of view. But either of those pressures help push us, or should help push us, to be what we should be for the Lord. I know there's this thing we call camaraderie, and when you're a part of a team, or when you're part of the military, or if you're part of a group that is trying to achieve something, those people pushing you, it just helps you get more out of you than you would ever get just being on your own. And so I believe the people who are looking for you to fail, that's pressure you can use to live for the Lord. And then those that are trying to live for the Lord with you, that's also pressure. But both of them, I think, push us in that race to take one more step, to get up. When we do fall down, to go ahead and get back up, to jump those hurdles, to go through those obstacles, and to get there. I think that's so important. And I really believe that men, and I'm just saying this, I hope it's not offensive, but I think men are bad about being Christians around their wife and their kids on Sundays, and then going to work and being just like everybody else they work around. And the reason I say that is I've been there in my early life, policing. I lived a life that was just, you wouldn't have known that I was a child of God any more than anybody else. I just kind of blended in wherever I was at. And I think that happens. I think that even the most macho men feel peer pressure to fit in and to be just like the people who are around. I think that really happens a lot.
Well, yeah, that's something Brad and I mentioned. I was going to say last time, but it might be, that a time ago. Is that, look, belonging is a big deal. That's one of our core longings, right? Love, acceptance, belonging, purpose. And so so we're in different areas of life. It's like, oh yeah, I want to fit in. I want to feel like I belong here. I want to be a part of this. I don't want to stand out in the wrong ways, which is not what we're called to necessarily do.
Right. But it does happen. It does happen. We have a tendency to go to work, and whatever they're like, we just become. We just become that. And then we don't realize that we're losing our opportunity to make a difference in their life, because when we live differently than they do, and we live for the Lord in front of them, not in some kind of Pharisaical way or some kind of uppity way, but when we just live for the Lord in front of other men, what happens is when those other men run into difficulties in their life, they immediately begin to come to people like you to see what you have that can help them. And I think we lose that when we just become like them in an effort to fit in. We lose that chance to be a real witness.
Yep. One thing that's always hit me is if I'm at church and someone that I work with walks in, are they going to be shocked that I'm there, or are they going to be like, "Oh, of course he's here"? I think, yeah.
I'll tell you a story. I don't know, this is story time, but I remember policing, and I don't know if you've heard it. I was policing one night, and there's this car parked on the side of the road, kind of halfway in the road, halfway out of the road. And, it's 2 a.m. and I pull up, turn the blue lights on, so nobody runs over this car. And I'm like, well, it must have broke down. I get there, and there's a guy sleeping in the front seat. And at that time in South Carolina, we get him out of the car, and he's just wasted, intoxicated, But at that time in South Carolina, he couldn't be charged with DUI because he wasn't actually operating it. It was very obvious he was, but you couldn't. In that day, we couldn't. You can now. We couldn't then. And so I get the guy out of the car. I'm like, hey, dude, here's the deal, man. I'm going to have to take you to jail. I'm just going to charge you a public drunk. I said, it's just because I can't let you go. You're intoxicated. You get run over. It's going to be on me. I said, but take you to the jail. We're going to put you in a drunk tank. 6 hours. I'm going to write you a ticket. You go home, you'll be out. And he's like, no, you just can't take me to jail. I'm like, dude, it's not a big deal. And he's like, no, I just can't go to jail. I said, I promise, bro. I know your wife's going to be mad, whatever. She'll get over it. She'll give you a speech, this, that, and the other. You can be fine. He said, no, you don't understand. I'm a deacon at my church. And I remember thinking, I wish he wouldn't have told me that. He still went to jail, right?
Yeah.
But I'm thinking some church somewhere's deacon. He's parked on the side of the road, hanging in and outside the road, and it just, yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. And back then, that's back when they put it in the newspaper, the police blotter kind of thing, So I know I know he had to be embarrassed, but that goes back to what you're saying. It's kind of this false life that you're presenting in front of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even then, like part of the verse was talking about, and you had mentioned that we lose focus.
We do. That's the point. He says, we're looking to Jesus. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're in this race. He said, and you're running this race. He said, but you got to be careful, and you got to get rid of the weights and the sin that's distracting you. That's pulling your focus off Jesus. That's what he says. And what happens is we have to quit being led by these weights and these sins. And I use the example when I'm preaching that would be like going in a race and carrying like dumbbells with you. Nobody does that. You see a guy running a race, he's got like the lightest tennis shoe he can have on, the lightest shirt he can have on, the lightest shorts he can have on. He's running, right? He says, you would run with weights in your hands, but there are things that distract us from following Jesus. And he makes this stipulation that some are weights and then some are sin. And what he's saying is, there's things that are clearly sin that you can't let in your life because that'll cause you to lose focus with the Lord. But he also says there's things that he called weights. They're not necessarily wrong, but if the focus is on these things, it's wrong because you're taking your focus off of Jesus. That's the idea that he's putting out there. And I've seen it 1,000 times. Things that weren't sin distract a man and kill a man's Christian walk for the Lord.
Well, even as simple as what you were saying, as far as like being one way on Sunday and then being another way at work because you're trying to fit in. I mean, that doesn't sound necessarily like a sin as much as that part of that weight.
It can be that weight. And I've made this statement, and I feel like this is true. I feel like that sometimes blessings can become curses in our lives. I've known guys that have nothing, no wife, life's not this, and they get saved. Lord save them, change their life. Man, they start living for the Lord. Man, they get into a good church. They meet this girl. They have 2 or 3 kids, get a great job, and then they buy a boat and a camper, and we ain't seen them since. Does that make sense? It's
like I got all my stuff. I'm good.
A boat or a camper. Yeah. Who needs Jesus? I got everything now.
Yeah. God, you gave me blessings. Of course you want me to use them.
An example of that is that not a great example of that? Lot in the Bible. Remember Lot when he left with Abraham had nothing? He had nothing, and he's just Lot. He's just the nephew of Abraham. That's all he is. And then all of a sudden the Lord just blesses him and gives him so much stuff that Abraham and him can't live in the same area together. They're feuding and fighting. He said, I'm going to go down to this little town called Sodom. I'll be okay. I'll be down there if y'all need me. And we know how that story turns out. And this blessing that Lot had, when we get to the end of the story, he's running up a hill. His wife's done been turned to salt and everything he owns is burned up in a fire. And it goes from a blessing to here now it's a curse. And those are things that you would say, what's wrong with having stuff? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a very common, particularly American Christian male. I think that's one of the problems that we have. A lot of Christian males who live in third world countries, that live in countries of difficulty, of communism and oppression, they tend to lean on the Lord harder because they need him. And here in America, in the land of blessing, we end up serving the American dream, a house and 4-car garage and a boat. We chase that down. We're not looking at the prize, which is Jesus Christ, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. We have a tendency to look on the things.
Yeah. I love that point you were making, because when you were I heard the sermon, Chris sent me the link, and I had thought about what you were saying when you talked about this, the distractions in our life, because I went on a missions trip with a bunch of guys, amazing time in Guatemala. And we were in a small little village in Guatemala. Yeah. And the guy that led it, he told everyone, he was like, hey, we've been there about 3 days. He was like, hey, I just want to let you guys know that like you guys might start having like some, like these attacks right? Not physical attacks, but like these spiritual attacks on you that you've never had before. And he said, because, not physical attacks, but he said, because in America, we get distracted so often that really, like, you'll have spiritual attacks, but really there's no real need for these almost overt, like in your face spiritual attacks, because the average Christian man is distracted all the time. There's all these other things that could be good, but do distract him from his walk with Christ. And man, we're there in Guatemala and in the poorest of the poor. And sure enough, there were guys that were like sharing things that they had never had to deal with and happen, because now we were like fully invested, right? Everyone there, every morning devotions, right, every night devotions, like focused and sharing the gospel and doing all this stuff. And all of a sudden they're seeing all these things or feeling all these things. And so, I mean, you're hitting it on the head. Like I love, like, and don't worry about stepping on people's toes. We step on them all the time on this podcast. Like sometimes Chris has to rein me back a little because I get a little fired up. But I love what you're putting out. Like that is 100% right. The average American Christian man. Like, wow.
Yeah, I think what you were saying about being there in Guatemala. A guy told me one time the devil don't shoot at people who aren't shooting at him. And I think what happens here is that so many of us we're the Bible says you can't serve God and mammon or God and stuff. He says you can't do that. You have to pick one or the other. And if we're honest as Americans, we look around, the average American male gets up every day and he lives his life for the stuff that he has. Now, I know he's getting paid, but the money's just going to buy more stuff and more things and things that bring us more comfort or more enjoyment. And if you notice, the more stuff we have in America, the less happy we are, the less fulfilled we are, the less excited we are about our lives. And what we find is that I think God was right. He said, you've got to serve me or it. You can't have both. He says, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul, period. I mean, you do that, right? And I think that we don't face a lot of the spiritual attacks because, like you said, we're not serving him. We're serving stuff. We're so distracted we don't even notice the devil moving in, or we don't even notice when the Lord's moving. We don't notice it because we're so focused on stuff. I mean, I really feel that way.
Well, like you're saying, that the busyness, that the weights, all these things that keeps us from looking at the finish line.
Sure.
And so we're not focused on this finish line anymore. And it's even the crowd of witnesses. When you were talking about that, I'm thinking, oh, well, yeah, the crowd. Oh, hi.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I know this is offensive to men, but here's what men do. I think one of the things that men do that's difficult, they'll born again believers, males, they'll tell their kids to say the blessing and say their prayers before they go to bed at night. And we got to go to church on Sunday morning, got to do these things. But then the minute the child gets old enough for sports, we will sell them to the sports gods, and we will go travel ball every weekend. We'll go, it doesn't matter. We'll let them practice every night of the week. It doesn't matter to us. And youth pastors are struggling to get children in youth groups because they're on the ball field, and they're on the weekends, they're traveling here and traveling there to play ball. And when you talk to guys about it, I mean, they get so offended by it because they're like, yeah, but I mean, I'm trying to develop their talent and I want them to be X, Y, and Z. And I just want to scream. But what does it profit a man if he gained the whole world and lose his own soul? And it just sounds terrible to say that, but it's true. It really is.
Well, and even then, the sad part about that is we're the ones who are leading them off the cliff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're removing them from the church, from times that are dedicated to the Lord, and the whole time saying, oh no, but we love the Lord. And the kids, I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're not dumb. They hear what you're saying, but they see how you're living, and they know what's valuable to you and what's important to you and what's not. They really, when it comes down to what we're talking about, they really know where your focus is. Is it on the Lord, or is it on this, whether it's sports or whatever, or your career or whatever. They can tell what's really the priority in your life, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Children are great readers
absolutely.
of character. They know our character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And they get to see what's behind the curtains.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love it because, like, let's be honest. So I played ball all the way through college football. And at a point there, I was like, oh, maybe I'll go to the league because one of my buddies went. And so we're all living like with him, right? So we're like, wow, we could go too. The percentage of people that start, let's say, football and get to the pro level is, I can't remember exactly, but it was like 0.000%. Like, it's such a minute number. And hey, if that kid, like, if he's got the talent, he's got the talent. That's cool. But like you said, and this is like, hits me so hard. We made this decision with our kids a long time ago where we told them very, very frankly up front, like, you can do sports, but if it starts creeping into your obligations, like on the spiritual side, right, and it starts becoming this big thing, then you're done. You're out. But it's the eternity piece, right? Like, and that's what I like when I hear you talk about, you just want to scream. I feel that so much because I'm like, man, this is an eternity decision, an eternal decision. You're either going to die without Christ for eternity, or you're going to live with Christ for eternity. Forget the millions of dollars you might get if you end up playing for some team at some level. Like, forget that. Like, you can die tomorrow. Like, where are you going? Hey, yeah, you're step on all the toes you need to step on right now. Like, please.
Well,
step away.
To go to your point, less than 1% of all football players will play professional football, but 100% of everyone will stand before the Lord and give an account of his life. And that's that's what's at stake, And I think that we as men, I hate to say it, but we're the driving force. And I love football. You talk about football. I mean, pro football is my thing. Boy, I just love it. And pray for me. I'm a Dolphins fan, but I love football. But we're the ones driving children to play sports to try to somehow get our kids to achieve something maybe we wish we would have achieved. I think that happens a lot too. We kind of live through our children, if you want to call it that.
Oh, somebody's meddling.
Well, I think it's true. I think because we think, I could have played, so I'm going to make sure my kid does. I think that's what happens. I see that a lot. Yeah. I see it a lot, and it's frustrating, and it's frustrating because what happens is these kids, these children, they're growing up in sports, and then once sports, you see all of a sudden, then the parents coming back saying, "We're having these problems in our children's lives," and you're like, it's because you're kind of building in the wrong things, not planning the things that they really need in their lives. It just happens.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Yeah, we are in agreement with that. Look, yes, we all know that Brad would have been able to have gone to play pro if he had gone to travel ball when he was younger.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep,
but no, it's the priority, right? Where's our priority?
Right.
Where's our focus? And it's not just sin that's keeping us from running the race that's distracting us. It is these weights, these things that we think are good that then we're because we've also talked about this because we're saying yes to something when we're saying no to something else.
Right.
And so we're saying no to going for our kids to be part of youth. We're not telling them that this is a priority. We're not telling, and actually you say, and guys, we're going to put the link for the sermon so you can listen to it because you said, look, if you're doing 40 minutes of devotion with the kids every night, great, but we know you're not. we know that's not happening. So let's make sure that they're getting fed, one way or the other.
Yeah, no doubt. We use the example in the sermon, and y'all know this, that the devil, the world, what they do is they treat us like a magician does, right? A magician is doing a trick in front of us, and all he's really doing is distracting us while he's doing this. And he's doing it in plain sight, but we don't see it because he's got us watching everything else. And that's what the world is doing to us. Not all these things are bad things, but these things are distracting things, and it's taking our focus off what's really important and putting it on things that don't really matter. And I think that's what really is happening, particularly in the world that we live in today.
Yeah. And this might be opening up an entirely other episode, but just to ask us, we talked about the weights, but why do you think that people hold on to the sin that distracts them when they know it's sin that's keeping them from running that race?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I said that if you're going to focus on Jesus, you're going to focus on running the race that God's put in front of you. You've got to get rid of the sin, right? You've got to get rid of these things that you're doing. And I made the statement that you can't go forward in your life and be the husband you want to be looking at porn. You can't be the husband you want to be cheating on your wife. You can't be the husband you want to be partaking in these things, right? So you've got to get rid of it. And when people say, but I'm a sinful person, I have this sin nature, I can't help it, I don't want to do it, but I do it. I just be honest with you, Chris and Brad, it is just most of the time excuses because they like what they're doing. And that's the real bottom line. And I know in my life, the reason I eat ice cream and Krispy Kreme when I know I shouldn't is because I like it. I like it. I mean, I'd like to have a 6-pack, but I like the ice cream too. And I think that's what our sin is. They're weighing eternal consequences, physical consequences, and something they really enjoy. And they hold on to them because they enjoy them. And this idea, I need a support group, I need this, 90% of what you need is you need to quit doing what you're doing. That's what you need to do. People say, well, I need somebody to talk about. Well, talk about it with. And I say, well, we just talked about it. You know what's wrong, quit doing it. I mean, that's kind of what really needs to be done. And men who are so macho, I can do anything, be anything, achieve anything, except get rid of these things in my life that I need to get rid of. And I go, hey, you can't have it both ways. If you're that macho, you're that strong, you got those abilities, let's put it into practice when it comes to the sin. Let's get rid of it. Cut it off. Burn it down. Throw it away. Whatever you got to do, get rid of it. And why they hold on to it? Because they like it.
Yeah. Truth. Yeah. That's truth. That's right there.
Really good.
Yes.
Well, we make excuses. Well, porn is so abundant. You can get it anywhere now. That's not the problem. The problem is you want to look at it. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the real problem. It's just, it's not McDonald's fault that I eat bad just because there's one on every corner. It's not their fault. It's my fault for going through the drive-through, right? It's the same way with all these other things. It's not it's available. It's a heart issue is what it is. It's not an availability issue. It's a heart issue.
Yeah, everyone feels like they're the victim.
Absolutely.
When in actuality, they're not the victim. They put this on themselves. Yeah.
I made a statement from the pulpit. You probably never heard anybody say this before in your life from the pulpit, but I made a statement that when people come in my office and they sit down and they tell me all the terrible things that's going on in their life, and they portray to me like they're victims. They're victims of what they're not victims. They're idiots. If you tell me, look, I had a hammer, I went and got a hammer, I hit myself in the head with it. You're not a victim. You're an idiot. And what happens with sin is you go get it, you play with it, and it burns you, and you go, I'm a victim. You're not a victim. You're an idiot. That's what you are. I mean, that's how it is. I know that. And I think we try to make everybody out to be a victim. And you're not. You're not a victim.
That's your cop perspective. That's how that gets in there. I love it. It's 100%, right?
Yeah. And they sit on your couch and like, I need help. And they tell you what they've done. And you're like, you're just thinking, I mean, I don't even know what to say. Like, I mean, I want to say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why would you do that? And the real truth is they like it. And then when they get caught with it, then they're a victim. They pretend to be, and it's not, you're not. You brought this into your home. You brought it into your life. You knew the consequences. You played with it. This is what's happened. Just quit doing that. Just quit it. Just stop.
Yeah.
And there's tools and resources to help you, but it's got to be a decision made at some point that, hey, I got to get over this. I want to quit this.
Well, yeah, you got to make the decision you want to stop.
Right.
And then start to walk in that. But yeah, you got to, and look, sin will always cost you more than you ever thought you'd pay. Yes. And it'll always take you down roads you never thought you'd go down. But once you're down there and like you said, you get caught, then don't keep doing it.
Yeah. It's like the prodigal son, right? He looks at the pig food and he goes, what am I doing? And the Bible even uses a phrase that's similar to, he came to himself. He's like, have I lost my mind? And the answer was, yeah. Yeah, you did. And he's like, I got a father back here. He's got everything I ever need. He'll forgive me. I'm going to go back and be a servant. And he turned and he went the opposite direction to where he was. And that's the real key, that most people haven't gotten to a place to where they realize, hey, this sin's going to cost me everything I got, everything I hold dear. And I'm going to go back. I'm going to turn around and go in the opposite direction of where I'm at. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to leave this sin here, and I'm getting away from it. And that's the real key. You have to make a decision to drop the weights and to drop the sin. You will never finish the race, run the race the way you should, holding on to those two things. You just will not do it. You can't do it. It's impossible.
No. And I was actually going to say, if there is someone who's listening, if there's a man listening, and he knows that he's way off course, and maybe he isn't even running anymore, maybe he's in the ditch. I was going to ask, where does he start?
Yeah, it starts with that decision. It comes back to this. Once you realize you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, that's where you got to be. You've got to get, we call it the end of the road. We call it whatever we want to call it, but really the bottom, call it the bottom if you want to. Once you realize that's where you're at, then you've got to turn, just like Scripture says, to the only one that can help you, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. So Jesus is the one who started your faith. Jesus is the one who will finish your faith. You need to go back to Jesus. The Bible gives us clear statements. Draw nigh to him, he'll draw nigh to you. Every step you take toward Jesus, he takes one towards you. So it may have taken you a year to get away. It won't take you that far to get back, because both of y'all be walking. He'll be walking towards you. You'll be walking back toward him. And you'll get back to him quicker than you got away from him. I guarantee you. But it starts with that repentance and turning from your sin and turning. And I'm talking saved people who know the Lord, who are walking. You just messed up. You just got to turn from that thing, repent on it. And you just got to start walking back. You draw nigh to him, he'll draw nigh to you, and he will help you. He will. He'll forgive you. He'll help you. There'll be some consequences. We know sin costs, but there'll be forgiveness, restoration. All those things are possible. But you've got to turn, and you've got to just realize it's no one's fault. There's no one to blame. There's just something has to happen, and that is you got to get back. That's what's got to happen.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Great stuff. Well, you know what? Just to kind of wrap this up, just because this is powerful stuff, and this is important stuff for men in general, whether you're striving to stay on course or you've fallen into the ditch, right? To keep that focus and to make sure that we are running a race that we're accountable to this people. And I guess looking at it this way, because the average man, he's running for himself, and he's not even thinking about the influence that he has over anybody watching. Right. And he gets distracted by the pleasures and all the things of the world. And he makes the race all about himself. I mean, let's just call it how it is. But the above average man, he knows that he has people watching him, and he takes his legacy seriously.
Yes.
And he'll throw off all those weights, anything that's hindering him, anything weighing him down or causing him to stumble. And he keeps his eyes fixed on Jesus, knowing that honoring him is the real win. So men, go and be better than your average man. Pastor Matt Burrell with Liberty Church in York, South Carolina. It has been a pleasure. Yes. We're really glad that you again joined and shared with us. And we're going to put contact information in the discussion notes in the comments. Certainly, guys, subscribe, like, comment. If you wanted to see more of Pastor Matt, you can find those on the YouTube channel as well. So, Matt, thanks again. This was a great time.
Hey, I had a great time. Thank you for having me, guys.